Today we're going to digitize a satin letter from start to finish. I'm going to go slowly and explain all the steps. On the screen you can see that I have my EmbroideryWare program open, and there's absolutely nothing on the screen. I've literally just opened it. The first thing I'm going to do is go over to the corner here and click the new icon, and that gives me my desktop to start working. And I'm going to be digitizing this letter off a BMP image. So I'm going to import the image, and I'm going to click on this insert image button. It looks like a little mountain with a little sun over the top of it. I'm going to click that, and I've already been into this folder doing other things, so my letters are here. And this is just a font that I have opened in Word and done a screenshot of and then cropped it. And what I did when I cropped it is I cropped it as close as I could to the top and the bottom, at least, so that I can see how big it is when I put it into the desktop. So I'm going to go ahead and select the one. I'm going to do the G today since I've already done A through F, and I'm going to click open. And you'll see that it doesn't look like it's done anything. But if you look right down here at the bottom of the screen, it says click where the image should go. So this gives you the opportunity to put it anywhere in your hoop. I'm just going to go ahead and click, and that places it in. And I'm going to go ahead and move it. It's hard to get an example. Oops, I have to select over here. I keep forgetting to do that. I'm very new to this program, so just bear with me. There we go. Now I can grab it. And what I'm going to do is I'm putting it right in the crosshairs, and I'm going to get the bottom of that G just as close to that line as I can. And I'm going to go up here and I'm going to zoom this in a lot. And then I'm going to use the pan feature here, and it's just the hand. I'm going to click on it, and then you click on the grid, drag it, and I'm not holding it. You click and release, and then when you get it where you want, you click the button again to release it. And now I'm going to go ahead and use the move icon here again. Click it and release, and then I'm going to click the design, and you just click it once and release the mouse button. And I'm doing this fussy work right here so that I can get an accurate size on my design once I'm done. So that's pretty good. And you'll see that I have a ruler showing over here. And up in this menu right here where it says show hide, if you open that, you can select what you want to see on your screen. And I've selected that I want to see ruler. And I've also changed that, whoops. Let's try that again. Move this right back over here. I guess I probably should unselect that icon, maybe. You can change this from millimeters, centimeters, and inches, and that's done in the hoop settings. So you're going to go ahead and hit select hoop, and you'll see that you can also change your hoop size. And I'm working in a 4x4 hoop, and that just seems to be just fine for me. Here's where you would change what your ruler shows here. I have it in inches because that's what I'm most comfortable with, and I know that I want this font to be 1 inch tall when I'm done. So I'm going to just go ahead and close this since I have everything set the way I want it. And you'll see that if you were to visually remove that little bit of white at the bottom here, that bottom of that G is sitting pretty much right on that line. Now I'm going to resize this. I want it to be 1 inch high, so I want it to be up here. So I'm going to, and you'll have to bear with me, I'm still new to some of these menus. I'm going to click this menu right here, and this will probably be the thing that you end up going back and forth. Okay, which menu is it? I'm still doing that. I've done a few letters so far. I'm getting a little better at it. And we're going to do scale it using 2 points. I'm going to click that, and I want this point to stay here, so I'm going to click it first, and then I'm going to click the one opposite it, and that acts just like the handles in other programs. And then I can just drag this right up, and I want the top of that G to be right at that line. And then remember, I'm clicking the dot and then dragging it, and I'm not holding the mouse button. You just click it and release it, and then that will drag, and then you click it and release it to let it go. And if I wanted to go back the other way, that is still set, so I can, whoops. I'll click undo. Apparently that isn't still set. So if I needed to adjust it, I could still go under here and scale. Click the 2 mouse buttons. And I could have used the other 2 diagonals as well. So now that I have my image as 1 inch high, which is what I want when it's finished, I'm going to zoom this in a bit more. I'm going to get it nice and big here. And I'm going to use the pan tool, bring it back down, get it where I want it. The next thing I'm going to do is, you see how dark this G is? It's basically solid black. We need to be able to see what we're doing over the top of this, because we're going to draw over the top of this image. I'm going to go over here and I'm going to change the opacity, and I found that 0.3 seems to work pretty well for me. So I'm just typing in highlighting the 1 and changing it to 0.3 with my keyboard, and then I'm going to click over here in the grid, and apparently I still have the pan on. There we go. That allows me to see the image, but I'll be able to see what I'm doing over the top of it. The next step is going to be deciding how you want these stitches to run. And first thing you're going to be doing is putting the underlay on. And I think that I'm going to have it come up here, come down here, and go here, and then come back up here, back up here, back up here for the underlay. So there'll be two rows of straight stitching for the underlay, and then start the satin here and come back around and then finish here. So to create the underlay, I'm going to go up here to the curve tool, and I'm going to click that. And then I'm going to come right over here to the point. I'm going to be in just a little bit. And with a curve, I'll stop here in a second. You'll notice that there's 2 points that are squares, 1 on either end, and 2 circles. The squares are the end points, and the circles are controls for the curve. And I'll show you that just a little bit further as we go here. And I'm not sure if this is something that is intentional in the program or not, but I seem to have found that on a tighter curve, put your points closer together, and you'll notice I'm right in the very center of my graphic here. And once we get out here where it's straighter, I'm going to go further apart. And you'll notice now that it's wider, I'm sticking a little bit more to one side than the other. And when I come back, I'm going to do another row over here, so it makes it a little wider. Now that it's getting narrow, I'm going to go back to the center. Okay, now when you're going to change directions, it's probably a good idea to have that control point at the end. And I'm going to just make a couple of, the end point at the end. So it's kind of a pivot. So that's an end. Now I'm going to come down here, and this is wider, so I'm going to stick over to the side a little bit. That just gives me a nice underlay. There's an end point. And now it's starting to get narrow again, so I'm going to start veering off to the center. And here it's going to be a really tight turn, so I'm going to do really close together. Okay, that's an end point right there, so we need 3 more clicks. 1, 2, and 3. And now I'll come back this way. Coming back's a little easier because you just basically click over the top of the ones you've already got there when it's narrow like this. And now it's starting to widen up a little bit, so I'm going to start veering off. And you'll see what I'm doing for the underlay here. And this is going to be another control point, so it'll be a circle. And there's an end point there. And then we'll start coming this way. And it's starting to widen up a little bit. So I'm going to come out here. That may be a little too far, but we can adjust that later if we need to. It's getting narrower, so I'm going to come back here. And I'm getting a sharp curve, so I'm going to make these close together. And I'm just left clicking the mouse button. That's each click places a point. Now I'm back to where I started. And if I were to just, I mean, this thing is still stuck on there. To release that, to stop it from wanting to draw anymore, right click your mouse button. I'm not sure why it just did that. It seemed to assume that I was done. You'll get this menu that comes up and it says you can just say end drawing, which somehow it already did. Now you're going to see that I have a bunch of lines in here. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to come down here and I'm going to click those lines that I just made. That just made a stop over here in my list. You'll see that all these little points are still up there now, and I have a red line, which means it's selected. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come down here and I have that selected. Remember, always when you're working in this box, always make sure you have selected up here what you really want to work with. I'm going to come down here and I'm going to tell it add stitches to lines is false. False means off, true means on. So I'm going to click the false just to select it, and you'll get this little box. I'm going to click the box and I'm going to change it to true. That's going to change that line. These aren't actually stitches here. These are just lines. So that is going to change those lines into stitches. Then I'm going to come down here to tell it what kind of stitches I want. And under type, I'm going to click that, and I'm going to click the box. And I'm going to say as drawn single, because I just want a single running stitch. And I want it as it's drawn. So the next thing I'm going to do, you'll notice all those weird lines are gone now. You'll also see this green box and the red box. The green box is the start position. The red box is the ending position. Typically, you want those very close to each other, and I'm actually going to move that red box so that it's down here so that I don't have a jump stitch when I go to add my satin. So I'm going to come up here to this menu where it says Point Functions, and I'm going to click Edit Points. You can also get this if you were to right-click your mouse button. It'll be on that menu as well. When you do that, you'll see that when I hover over these little spots, they turn red. That means that it's ready to be edited. And this one, in this case, you'll see there's a red dot. I'm not sure if you can see that. There's a red dot right underneath that in the square. The square is the end point, and that's what I want to move. So now that it's turned red and I've got the square, I can click it and I can drag it. And then you have to click to release it. Whoops, clicked one too many times. There. Now I have my starting and end point right on top of each other. So the next step is we have our underlay. We're going to go ahead and unselect that, and you'll see here's all the little stitches. So now that we have that, we're going to go ahead and start making our satin. And remember, we decided we're going to start here, and this is where our underlay starts and stops. So if it were stitching out, it would be sitting right here. And I'm going to go up here, and these are all really curves. I'm going to go up here and I'm going to do curved column. The curved column allows you to do a width, and you'll see that I have a little dot, or a square actually, and I want the end to be kind of rounded, so I'm going to put these first two squares together, and you'll see that as I get out of this area a little bit, you'll see that I have actually 3 are placed. And now you'll be able to see it. You'll see that there's a dot in the center, and that's basically the center line of this. And that can be used for editing as well. And so I've got the start, control, endpoint. And remember what I said about going close together on these close curves. And the one thing you want to do as you're doing this, you'll see that I have 3 squares right in a row. Wherever your squares are is going to determine the angle that the stitches are going. And I'll explain that just in a little bit here. You'll notice that the inside of the curve I'm going here, but the outside I'm going here. The next outside I'm going to go really tight here, and then I'm going to go a little further. Basically, if you can see how these go across here, that's how your stitches will lay. If I were to put one way over here, my stitch would be at an angle like this, which I don't want for this particular design. So I'm just going to keep it, and I'm just following that gray outline of that letter, and it doesn't have to be super perfect. And I'm going to show you what all these control points do here just after I get this all done. You just keep going right around. And when you get to where it's a little more straight, you can make bigger. Whoops, that one wants to be there. Getting ahead of myself here. And with the tight curves, you probably can do them further apart. I just had good luck doing it with them tight together like that because I can visualize what I'm getting. Now here I want the stitches to start coming around the curve, so I'm going to go tighter here and wider here. Tighter here. And I'm just visualizing where I want those stitches to lay. Now I want them to start really coming around the corner. And you'll see as I click that second end point, okay, that's a control point. When I click this one, you see these lines are all red. They'll turn black, and that will form my curve. Put this one back here. Now see that formed a curve. And you just keep on going. And I'm going to put my last end point for a second right there, right where it starts to want to go down here. Now, something that we need to think about when we're deciding how we're going to digitize this would probably be too wide of a satin. It might be okay, but then how do you do that? You can divide this into a triangle. I'll leave the red line here as a visual. The upper portion could be done as a triangle where you make a running stitch to come up here, and then you come down and do satin down to meet this, and then you complete the satin down here. What I've done is I have just kind of made a visual line from here down to here. And it's kind of hard to see with that red line hooking on there, but I don't want to end my stitches right now. But if I'm just going to visualize a line to make this left side over here be a consistent width from here to here and here to here and all the way down. So I'm going to just, and it's okay if it overlaps. I'm just going to go ahead and continue. Let's see, where do I want to put that? And I'm making this narrower, and we can adjust this later too. And that's an end point, and that probably will be just fine. So now I've got this spot up to here, but then I want to go up here and come down and go over the top of this. So how do I get there? I'm doing a column right now, so if I were to continue going over there, I'm going to have to click that second thing to form a width. What I want to do is switch to line. So I can right click my mouse and I can switch to line or a curve. And actually, I'm sorry, I said a curve. I've said a line, I meant a curve. So I'm going to go ahead and just switch to a curve, which is what we did first. And you'll see that when I do that, it knows that this section is done as a column, and it fills it all in with stitches. So I ended here. I'm going to just draw a traveling stitch, and I should have placed that last one up there, but that's okay. I'll just do a couple more. Okay, so now I'm up here at the top. Now I want to go back to satin again. So I can just right click, and I'm going to switch to a curve column again. And yes, you could use a straight, but it's not going to give you the opportunity to shape this. So I always use a curve. And here's my stop. And I'm going to go right up here because I want this to be rounded. So I'm going to do a narrow one and a little wider. And you'll see how that's starting to round out. And when I get here, I'm going to come right over the top of that other one. And if I don't want to see that satin, I can go over here to this hide column for that particular step, and I can just click that to hide it, and it will go away. So now I can kind of visualize where I'm supposed to go without the visual clutter of all that other stuff. And this is pretty straight, so I'm just going to go ahead and make these longer. And you'll notice I'm not worried too much about the jaggedy edges. I'm drawing here. I'm just using that image as a guide. Come there. And it doesn't have to be super perfect. You'll be able to adjust all this later. But it's to your advantage to get it as close as you can, because you'll have less editing to do. And you'll notice this is curving this way, so I want my stitches to start coming around. So I'm going to start aiming those just a little bit. There. And as you do this, you'll get more confident with it. And then the inside of the curve is going to go really tight. And again, remember that those square points are what ends up being the angle of your stitches. So if you get those the way you want them first, and I want that one to be right there. So even though that one's closer than that one, I'm changing the angle of those stitches in that area. And I just did an end point. If I can get this in 4 points, I'll be good. I'm just kind of planning ahead, because you always need to end with an end point. So there's a control point, and I'm going to take a little artistic license and bring that in a little bit, because I don't want it to be blunt, so blunt. Okay, now I've got this completely done, and I need to tell it, right click, I need to end drawing. And that fills that with stitches. And you can see this is a little choppy, but we're going to go back and fix all that. So I'm going to go up here and I'm going to unhide just by clicking that again. And I don't need to see the underlay right now. And I'm going to go ahead and select the section I want to work with. So I have this upper part, and you see all the red. When it's red, it's selected. And I'm going to go up here and I'm going to select Edit Points right here. And this is where you can make all these adjustments and make those curves nice and smooth. The control points, I'm going to show you how these work. If you grab a circle, which is a control point, you see how that bows everything out. So that allows you to kind of round those curves out a little bit. And that might be a little too much inside, so I'm going to just move it just a little bit. And it just takes some practice with these. And if I needed to adjust the direction of these stitches, I'm going to grab an end point. I'm going to just do this to show you. If I move this way, you see how my stitches, here's my 3 squares, and you see how the stitches have changed their angle. So I'm going to move this back, and that changes their angle. So the round ones don't change the angle, they just help adjust the curve. And it was really choppy over here, so let's do a little bit of fixing here. And that needs to come up a little bit because it's a little flat. And that's a little kind of sharp, pointy right there. It's really kind of hard to see. But look at that outside line. That will help you. Watch that red line. That's what you're adjusting at this point. This one needs to come out just a little bit. And you'll see that those stitches come right out to where that line is, which is really neat. And just continue. That looks pretty good there. And I'm just eyeballing this, following this around. Here it goes rather flat, so I'm going to grab this one here and I'm going to pull it out just to round that out. That fills that out a little bit. Comes around to here. This looks flat. And basically I'm just lining these up for the most part with that gray image that's behind there. And I'm just looking at it going, okay, that looks a little flat. And you can move the endpoints as well. That's probably a little too much right there. Just remember when you do those that they also control that angle of stitch, so you don't want to move them side to side. Let's move this out just a little bit. Okay, that looks pretty good. And you see how we have this going under here. I'm going to move this one just up just a little bit to make sure that when it stitches out, it is under that. And move that so that my angle changes with it. But I'm going to move it up really skinny because I don't want all that extra bulk underneath that. And so when this stitches out, this will stitch. It'll come up here. It'll just make a little quick running stitch, and then it's going to do satin down here. So it's going to cover up that little bit. So it'll overlay it a little bit. And that's really what we want at this point. And I think I'm going to make this just a little bit rounder right there. Okay, so I think that looks pretty good there. To check this, you just come up to this 3D button and click it, and that will show you what it's going to look like. And this spot right here looks a little flat to me, and possibly might be a little issue right here. This really dark blue that it chooses seems to be really difficult to see. So I'm going to go ahead and change the color, and I'm going to select all of even the hidden ones. I want it to all be the same color. So I'm going to select all of those, and I'm going to come down here to the box, and I'm going to click on Brother Color, and then the box comes up, and there's not a lot of choices here, and these are going to be exported as a DST, so it really doesn't matter. This is just giving you an eyeball color. The lighter color also helps you see the design a little better. So I'm going to go ahead and unselect those. I'm leaving that underlay hidden right now. And now you can kind of see this a little bit better. Now that we don't have that really dark stuff in here, you can see the gray better. There's a little flat spot right there and a little flat spot right there. So we'll go ahead and go back up to this menu for point functions. Click Edit Points. Whoops, I forgot to select. Got to have something selected before you tell it what you want to do. So Edit Points. And I'm just going to fix that just a little bit. And we'll fix this. Just rounding it out just a little bit. And then I'm going to go back to 3D. And you can see the lighter green makes it a little easier to see. So this is all nice and smooth. This is all tucked under here. So that looks good. And we'll go out of 3D. And now we're going to look at the running stitches. Those look okay. And you want it to be at start and stop, so that you don't have a big jump. And there is a way to switch those around, which is covered in another video. So if you don't end up having it that way, or if it ends up working out wrong, I'm going to go ahead. That part was okay. So now I'm going to go to the tail of the G, and I think I'm just going to pan this up a little bit. And I've got that selected, and I'm going to go edit points. And again, I'm just going to go through here and just smooth this out a little bit. And that part looked pretty good up there. And I'm going to come down here and see that this could come down a little bit, and that's very pointy and flat right there. So basically I'm just going to keep adjusting this until it looks nice. And it doesn't have to be a perfect rendering of the image that's below necessarily. And here I wanted the stitches to start coming this way. So I'm just going to swing that around that way, and you can see that the stitches have started to move now. And you'll see that even though these points aren't really close together, whoops, I right-clicked. And these points aren't necessarily going to be on the line. These are just pulling that line. So the more you pull it, the farther away it's going to be. And that's okay. If you wanted the tail of the G to be like that, go ahead. And you'll see that I have this image actually almost right on that line. So that gives me a pretty accurate representation of my 1 inch that I wanted. Okay, and we'll pull this out just a little bit. And I'm going to adjust that because I want it to start going straight. Oops. That wasn't quite what I wanted. If you make a mistake, just go back, and you know what you did, so just go back and change it. And there's also the undo button as well. Remember that that's there. And if you're not able to finish your design while you're working on it, you can simply go up here and do a save as, and it will save a stitch file, .stitch, and that can be reloaded into the program, and you can continue where you left off. So you don't have to do this completely start to finish. And this still looks funny to me. There, that looks better. Let's look at it in 3D. Okay, this little spot right here sticks out to my eye. I'm going to just round this out just a little bit, I think. And I wish these stayed selected when you're going back and forth into, oops, I forgot to tell it I want to edit the points. So I'm going to come down just a little bit. I don't want to make it like super fat there. And you'll see that I'm not exactly on my graphic. That's okay. This is my letter. This is my representation of that font letter. And when you're doing this, you're the artist, so this is now your design. And I think that looks pretty good. Let me pan it back down so we can see the whole thing. And we'll go back into 3D. So you have the whole letter. When it stitches, it's going to do an underlay that comes around here, comes up here, goes down here. Whoops. I keep accidentally clicking my mouse. My hand is getting crampy. Back into 3D. So when it stitches, it's going to come up from up here. It's going to come around here, up here, down, and then it's going to come back and up here, and then it will start the satin, and it's going to come around here, and then it's going to go a little straight stitch over to here, and then it will come down here, and it will end here. And we can actually see this play out. There's a little stitch simulator right here, and you can adjust the speed, and you can tell it whether you want to see it do it in 3D mode or in the stitch mode. And I want to see it actually do the stitching. And I don't remember if we have to have everything selected. Apparently we don't. We move this over here so you can see this is just a jump stitch from the center of the hoop, and it will not show. So here it's coming around. I have the stitching slowly. When it gets to the wider spot, it's going to come out here to give you a little bit more underlay. Now it'll start the satin. And you'll see the satin stitches start following the contour of the letter. And you can actually bump this up while it's doing its stitching. And I'm going to slow it back down here as slow as it will go so that you can see what it does when it gets up here. Now it's going to do a quick, that was stitching up there. Now it's going to come back down. It's going to go right over the top of this. And it will come around the curve and it will end. A couple more things we need to do. I'm going to go ahead and close the simulator. On the very last stop, you want to add a lock stitch. Go ahead and select the last stop. And we're going to come up here to the list, and under miscellaneous, there's lock it end. You want to make sure that you have your last selected, or your last section selected only. I believe if you have something else selected, it will add a lock to the end of each of the sections that you have selected. I'm not 100% on that, but I believe that's the case, because you're basically telling the end of that section, I want a lock stitch. So we're going to click that, and remember false is off, so we want it to be on, so we turn it to true. So now we have a lock stitch at the end of this, and we're also going to adjust the density. On the set that I've been working on with, now I'm up to the G, and now the G is basically done. And it looks like I might want to do a little bit of adjustment right there. It looks a little fatter than it should. I'm going to adjust the density of this. And just need to, here we go. I need to select all of my sections. Actually, the straight stitch, which is right here, I don't need to do. And that's the underlay. I don't really need to adjust the density on that. And this is just for the satin anyway. Under satin, I've got my two satin sections that I digitized selected. So under satin, satin spacing, it now says 4. I'm going to go to 3.5. And when I click over in the grid again, watch the stitches. Now there's more stitches. I'm just upping the density just a little bit so we have a nice, thick, heavy, nicely stitched design here. And that's really pretty much about it. I'm going to go back up here, and I'm leaving that one selected. I'm just going to do a little bit more adjusting because I'm actually digitizing this, not just demonstrating it. I'm just going to bring that in a little bit and look at it in 3D. That looks better to me. Just the small little changes like that can make such a big difference. So be fussy, unless you're just practicing. If you're doing it for something that you're going to use, be fussy about it. Okay, so that is digitized. Now I'm going to do a save as, and this is going to give me the stitch file so that I can come back in here and make changes to it later. It also will allow me to make another size. So even if you think you're done and you're not going to make any changes, save it, because you can come back in and you can make a 4x4 into a 5x7. You can make a 1 inch into a 1.5 inch in the case of the fonts. So just for the sake of ease, I'm just going to click one of those to get the title in there, and it's going to change the letter to G. So that's, oh, apparently I already saved it. I'm not sure when, but yes, we're going to save over the top of it. And now I'm going to get the stitch file, the one that I just did, even though it has a .stitch extension, is just the working file for the program. In order to actually put this in the machine, you have to export it. So the only thing available right now, at least, is exporting a DST, which is a standard generic file format, and it does not save any color information. So I'm going to just go ahead and just click one of these, and I'm going to change the letter to G. That just saves me from having to type everything again. And then I'm going to click Save. And that's pretty much about all there is to it. So here's the design open in Sew It Pro. I'll get it zoomed in here so you can see it really well. You'll notice that my green is gone. It's gone back to the default color. This is where you would assign your colors in your editing program. Remember, this is just a DST file, DST. So if I wanted to change it, I can change it to whatever format I want to in this program, and I can change my colors. I'm going to turn off, whoops. I'm going to turn off the texture view so you can see the stitch points. And you can see that looks very nice. We've got my underlay under here, and this covers up nicely, so there shouldn't be anything peeking through. And if I wanted to, I can move some of those stitches over. It doesn't seem to be a problem on the other letters that I've done where it stitches over them. That's pretty much how you do it. Not too difficult. It does take time to learn which menus to click on. Hopefully this video will be a little more explanatory in which functions to use and where to find those functions.